A little bit of context maybe to put the Maimer, to give some clarity what's going on here. The whole discussion here is bringing out the Maila, respectively, the respective Mailas of Nes on the one hand, and Teva on the other. And each has a unique Maila, and the point of the whole Maimer is that Lasid Lavai will be both Mailas at the same time, Aren and Iflois. That's the general formula of what's going on. So the Maimer is explaining in detail the Maila of both Teva and the Maila of Nes. Now just in broad general terms, that'll help us understand what the Maimer is telling us is this. That there's a Maila in Bli Gvul and a Maila in Gvul. The Maila in Bli Gvul is that it reveals Hashem's infinite presence. Now Hashem created us. In other words, from the perspective of Atzmos and Mohos of the Eibishter himself, there's really no difference. Both of them, Bli Gvul and Gvul, are at the same time neither per se express him, and he's equally removed from both. At the same time, when the Eibishter chooses to express himself, then for him, his expression is him equally in Bli Gvul and in Gvul. But by divine design, that's not the way he created us. The way he created us as part of Gvul, part of the created reality is that big is big and small is small. So in Gvul itself, we have this whole hierarchy for us. Bigger is more and less is less. Higher is higher and lower is lower. Atzilus is higher and Asiya is lower. And that's how God wants it to be, that there should be this ladder of divinity. Not only for us is Gvul not one blanket, finite reality, but in Gvul itself there's endless gradations, virtually endless. Relatively speaking, endless gradations in Gvul from our perspective, higher and higher and higher, more and more and more and more. 10 is more than 1, and 1,000 is greater still, and 10,000 and 1,000,000 and so on. And Bli Gvul, well, that's completely wows us. The whole notion of Bli Gvul, infinite, is meant by divine design to completely overwhelm us, and in the face of which dissolve our sense of significance and value. That's the way the Eibishter created it by divine design, and it's all rooted in the one essential desire of Dira B'Tachtonim. In order to have a Dira B'Tachtonim, you have to have an Elyon, you have to have a Tachten. All of these properties have to exist in order for a notion of lower, of Tachten, to be realized. For Tachten to be realized, there has to be Elyon. And in Elyon itself, it's not just Elyon higher than the Tachten, but Bli Gvul, fundamentally higher. That really makes the Tachten appreciated. And it's not just Tachten relative to something greater, but it's Tachten ultimately relative to Bli Gvul, the ultimate Tachten. So that's all the way Hashem created reality and our perspective. And therefore, that engenders the following. We appreciate miracles because a miracle is a revelation of Bli Gvul. And he's talking the classic miracles which completely shatter the laws of nature. And that, for us, is a pure expression of Alikus. There's no delusion that there's anything other than God when a miracle happens. So that's the Maila of Bli Gvul, that it reveals purely the Creator, or the beyond Creator even. The Maila of Gvul is that Hashem is not limited to Bli Gvul, that Hashem is invested even in finitude. But that is a discerning appreciation. That's not obvious. We get accustomed to nature, and the laws of nature are reality, and it's nature, and it assumes, and it can assume, from our perspective, a completely independent reality, to the point that we can forget or deny that there's a creator altogether. So nature itself, without a penetrating analysis, without seeing beyond the veil of nature, can completely conceal God. Hence, Olam Melashon Helim. But once we discover, as the Maimon explained, and appreciate that nature itself comes from the Eibishter, and moreover, as he explained beautifully from the Akedah, there is the bligvul in nature. There's glimpses of the infinite even in nature, begashmias. The fact that things, right, that the solar system, the planetary system is unchanging. Kayomim be'ish, they exist be'ish. The individual creation remains as it was initially, unweakened. And then there's on planet Earth, the various species are kayomim b'min. They exist in terms of the species as the eternal birth and birth and birth and birth. So we see that's a discerning, not obvious. The miracle doesn't need any meditation, but any hisboneness. But to see the bligvul and the reach of Hashem in nature, that requires hisboneness. It's concealed. So that's the upshot and the downshot. The upshot, the maila. This is the niflois levadoi. The maimis posited at the outset are invested dafke in gvul, in nature. And Hashem creates it. Again, for him it's all equal, but for us it's a bigger novelty. It's a bigger novelty to recognize that gvul is also him than to recognize that bli gvul is him. It's a bigger novelty for us. That's the chiddush. But that's a novelty and it's not obvious. What's obvious, what's naturally and without avodah, is bli gvul is him. With avodah, gvul is also him. Seeing him in nature. And because, from our perspective, it's this also him, therefore Hashem has, by divine design again, expressed himself that koyach hagvul is rooted deeper than koyach habligvul. Ultimately, they're all equal. It's that atzmos mamish, they're all equal. But if we trace back the madreges l'mayla, what did he say? That the shirish of gvul is tiferes hanelam. The shirish of miracles is soivev, is standard bligvul, good old infinite. But the shirish of gvul is tiferes hanelam, which is why if you look discerningly in gvul, you see bligvul as well, as we just described. So each one is a maila. L'osid lova, it's again a renu nifleis. It's the whole point of this is that there'll be both mailis at the same time. Namely, there'll be the mile of the gilui. It's obvious. Bli gvul reveals the infinite creator. It reveals there is a creator to start with. When you confront a miracle, there's no doubt or hesitation. There is a master to all of this. The miracle, just points to it without avodah. But then la'asid lavai, so there'll be the gilui, but there'll be the gilui of what? Of that in gvul. Seeing nature itself will be as transparently awe-inspiring as the miracle is, and constantly. Not so now. There was a simple illustration for this, which is, it's not just emotional, but it's really an expression of it, perhaps in some way would be this. When your child is born, that moment that you were witness, so you're not there, you're not supposed to be there, but you hear the wail on the other side of the curtain, and you hold the baby in your hand for those first moments. What strikes one there, and there's no hisboneness required here, is the miracle of life. And looking at the baby, you're not looking at the seichel, the midas, this is a live child. Before we even examine the child to make sure that everything is, the teva is working. That's our next consideration. We want to be certain. But the first thing is just the miracle of life itself. And that is awesome, and that's no hisboneness. But then as the child gets older, your child walks into the room, in the morning you're not, the miracle of a living child. It's complete, that recedes to the background. And what are you appreciating now is the child's, natural growth with all of its challenges. Not always is it so awe-inspiring. Sometimes it's frustrating. And there's lots of, hell and vehester there, and tough times. And you second, wonder why this whole thing, chas v'shalom, in the worst case scenario. But, there's the challenges of bringing up children. Then you have to look. Then there's an avodah to remind yourself of the miracle of life and look deeper, etc. But that's not obvious. So that's kind of it's not emotional. That's the truth. When the child is born, that's the miracle of life, and then teva takes over. But if you probe deeper, looking at your child, you see the miracle in everything. But that's avodah already, and that's deeper. This is not unlike, friends, a very cryptic but beautiful teaching in Hayom Yom, and I don't recall where it is. We could find it in a moment. Higher is when you're led by the hand. Deeper is when it's your own avodah. Right? So this is it's the same nekuda. Attending a fabrengen. There's no hisboneness there to be inspired. You're lifted, you're carried. But that's outside of your world. You've entered into this place, wow, of awe and wonder. Deeper is when you generate inspiration from within, not feeding off something that is blowing you away. And what's the ultimate maila? It's both at the same time. It's your own avodah, and yet it blows you away. It's awesome. It's begoloi. It's transparent. The fusion of gvul and bli gvul in one harmonious experience. That's giloy atzmus mamish, and that's areno niflois. Niflois explains is the madrege of the shadish of gvul. Loisin niflois gedolis levadoy. Only the Eibush himself knows that it's a miracle. You don't even know the miracle happened. And that will be areno, that will be revealed. The mile of teva and the mile min teva, all fused in one, in a seamless, both lamata, all at once. The virtues of both truths, which is expression of one truth, atzmos amos. That's kind of, in a way, oversimplifying, in a way, everything that we're talking about here, but this is be useful for us to put everything the Maimon is saying on the grid, in the general grid of what the objective here is. Are we clear? Yeah, little nod of your head. Hope that was helpful. Any comment or question? Don't hesitate. Let's go a bit further now. What page is it? Okay. Now, what he started saying in the last piece that we learned, that this whole chiluk you're talking about now, the maila of koyach hagvul and the maila of koyach bli gvul. In summary again, koyach bli gvul is more revelatory, reveals more. Koyach hagvul is deeper. It's a deeper expression. Just to zero in on that and add some further insight. Again, this is the way the Eibishter created us in His image, so that we can appreciate all of this. So, what takes more effort for you? To express the way you're feeling, or to contain your feelings? What takes more effort is the one who contains himself. Now, it's true for the other. Where are you more expressed? Where you're expressing how you feel, or you sit there, with a poker face and you don't know what's going on inside. So to the viewer, when you express yourself, you're more present. When you sit there in silence, we don't know whether you're upset, happy, angry, listening, not listening. It's a blanket. There's complete constraint. You're completely non-expressive of your opinion or emotion. So to the viewer, the casual viewer, there's no revelation. But the emes is that when you contain yourself in a given situation, you don't say, you don't express, you're really invested there much more. And that takes the viewer's insight. Eventually your wife gets to know that in your silence, you're expressing more than when you're expressing yourself. And likewise in her silence. Or she's not overly expressive. It's in the most subtle nuances that the real depth of the person is expressed. But that's a whole science and a study. That's the psychology, and you have to become and getting to know someone. That's the whole point, is to really appreciate the gestures, the nuances that don't express anything grand. But the real person is really expressed in that little gesture. That's what's really going on inside. But that's avodah. That's not obvious. That's not obvious. It's the same thing, teva and l'mayim min teva, different illustrations of these two dynamics. And again, la'asid lavai, it means that we will see in Olam Hazeh, the most physical, tiniest gestures of Elikus. Atzilus is grand, and Ein Sof is grand. And Olam Hazeh is this petty, tiny little world. We will see that in these tiny little creations of the Eibishter, we will see how his full presence is expressed there. And it won't be a struggle anymore. That will be areno niflois. We will see that in constant awe and wonder of the minutiae of life. As the Maimon will go on to say, we're not just, waiting one day for this Disney world to descend. This is all part of our avodah now, in Zman HaGolus. That's going to be the end of the Maimon. It's not just this is what awaits us, but we are partners in making all of this happen. But right now, the last thing we learned was that another analogy in bringing out the virtues, the respective virtues of Nes and Teva, is Yichud Ilah and Yichud Tata, or Bittul B'Metzias and Bittul Hayesh. That was the last thing we were learning. Let's start Ois Vov. Actually not. Just to get the flow of it, Elish Afapik V'yesh Loimar. Second line of the last paragraph of chapter Hey. Everybody has it? Yeah. Before he spoke about the Ratzon, also a Moshel, the Ratzon, Bligvul and Seichel is Gvul. It's another interplay, another. The emphasis, friends, we could really, all of Chassidus, everything, Oir Keli, everything can be reduced to this formula. It's all rooted in Bligvul and Gvul. Infinite and finite. They are the two Havaya and Elikim, the two, yes and no. This is the binary system that the Eibishter made the world and everything predicated upon. Revelation, concealment, yes, no. All of existence is based on this. The complexity, of course, of our phones and computers and the human body, it's all boils down to yes, no, connect, not connect, reveal, and in endless and complex patterns. So Rotzim and Seichel is another moshel, which was discussed at the end of the previous paragraph. Okay, so now continuing now, another model, Yichud Elah, Yichud Tata. Elish Afa Pikein, Maila Gamba Nisim Yam Lebashim Beteva. So Rotzin is like a moshel for Nisim, for the Nes, Bligvul. But there is a Maila in the Nisim that are invested in Teva, even though it's not transparent. Because in these miracles, it's not a question of a new reality transcending Teva, but control over Teva. Again, what that means is the reach of the Eid Ein Sof, the shleimus of Eid Ein Sof, that it contains also Keach HaGvul. That's really the point that he's saying. But then there's a chsaron here, per se, in when you're just controlling Teva is one thing. But when Teva itself in its minutiae is seen as being Elikus, that's the ultimate. That's the ultimate. But we're progressing towards this appreciation. But first, along the way, and again the same model, so the difference between the two nisim, a nes which is just transparently beyond nature, and the nes that comes in nature, this is similar to the bittul that's an expression of the higher unity and a bittul that's engendered by the lower unity. Now again, what's the difference between the two? Just to explain, right now what he's saying is that Teva, right now there's no bittul at all. Here, Teva is just Teva, finished. Now we're talking about, seeing Elikus. So, bittul. So there's Elikus in the miracle, and there's in a transparent miracle, and then there's Elikus invested in nature. The miracle in nature. It's a miracle that happens, but happens completely naturally. The laws, there's the healing, and we see what happens under the microscope, but there's a change here, and the person is healed. So this is analogous to, so there's gilu here. There's revelation. There's bittul. There's wow. But there's two kinds of wow or. There's yichud ilah and yichud tata. So there's the high unity and the lower unity. In simple language, the difference between the two is high unity means the perspective of Hashem, and the lower unity is the perspective, our perspective. And the difference there is, what's the starting point? Elikus or creation? The Yichud Ilah, the starting point is, there's an Eibishter. And the Eibishter decided to create. So this creation is totally nullified to him because it starts off with the truth, Ein Admo Vadai. And that doesn't change despite creation. So this creation is batel b'mitzias. The truth that was endures. Yichud Ilah. Yichud Tata is the starting point, is the self. There's me. But wait a second, I didn't come in a vacuum. So I recognize that there's a creator that created me. But my point of origin is me and self. That's bittul b'metzius versus bittul ayesh. Bittul b'metzius means that the entire existence of creation is bottle is transparent. The best way to describe that is that creation is nothing other than the consequence of God's will. It's like, again, the mashal of the Rav. When the Rav gives a mashal, the Rav is trying to explain something. So he gives a mashal of a king and a daughter. When he's saying that mashal doesn't in any way conceal the idea. It's batul b'mitzias to the idea. Every detail of the mashal is expressing the idea. He's not thinking two things in his head. It's one thing. But the Talmud, when he hears the mashal, and eventually he discovers that the mashal is expressing a very deep idea, that's bittul hayesh. Because he starts off with the yesh, with the mashal. And he extracts from the mashal that he knows. He's not just telling me a story of a princess and a king. The mashal is expressing some idea. But the starting point is the mashal. So bittul hayesh, the starting point is us and our sense of independence. But then we understand that everything has to have an origin, and there's a creator. We look around and we see design, and deeper do we arrive at the fact that there's a creator. But it all comes, the starting point is creation. Whereas Yichud Ilah, the starting point is creator. So that's the difference between the transparent miracle and the miracle that is in nature. And there's a mile in each one. He wants to bring out the mile now of each one. And therefore, Lasid Lavai, again, it's going to be both. What's the mile of, beautifully now, it says in the next few paragraphs, bringing the mile of Yichud Ilah, and then also bring out the mile of Yichud Tata. Let's see inside the text. Tzeischa legabe giloy and safar blig vola teva mizbat lemitziusoi. The kind of miracle that is just transparent, shatters the laws of nature. Nisim shalamayim yateva, hu al derech habitul dichudi ilo. That's bitul b'metzias. When you confront that, there's only Eibishter. Then we have to ask, is there also a creation? But that's yichudi ilo, bitul b'metzias. And how does a person connect to this kind of thing? That's a meditation where he meditates that all is absolutely nothing. The starting point is Einoid Mulvadoi, and everything is Kaloi Chashiv. So is there a creation or isn't there? There is, but it has no independence. It's merely a consequence. And the examples we have given in the past, perhaps the best example we can come up with, is when you conjure an image in your head. When you think about something in your head, it's not independent from you and not lost on you, that it's all it is your desire to think about it. That's why it's there. You start thinking about it, it's not there. You're thinking about your home. It's not something else in your head. It's you conjuring the image. It's Bitul B'Metzias, the home, that image. So as you close your eyes and you think of your house, that image in your head is Bitul B'Metzias to you, transparently. It's not something else. It's your desire to think of the image. So that's the end of that's what a nes expresses. However, but then we're talking now a miracle that happens, not blowing away nature, that happens in nature, so much so that it could be ignored, that there's a miracle here. It may not even be picked up. Okay, it went this way. So the teva remains in mitziyusay, but still upon discernment, but when we look deeper, the doctor has to say, I can see what happened, but this shouldn't have happened. But he can see that this is not according to the laws of nature, because all of the laws means things should have continued in this, progressed in this fashion, but it didn't. And he sees he sees that, we see a creator here. So that's similar to the bittul of Kabbalah's oil. Why? Because Teva really didn't change. It's deeper, we're going to see in a moment, what happens within nature. That's the upshot of seeing Elikus in nature. But it's like the bittul of Kabbalah's oil, which is, what's Kabbalah's oil? Kabbalah's oil is, I'm not inspired, not moved by the awesomeness of the master. In fact, I'd rather be out of here. I'd rather be sailing. But nonetheless, I do what I have to do, because it's happening within the constraints of nature. Even though, what's Kabbalah's oil? Kabbalah's oil is, I'm not transformed. I still feel me. I wake up in the morning, my first thought is not the master. It's I have to go to the bathroom. So much so as the Gemara says that an Eved, your classic Eved, you're looking at him, he's obedient and he's doing what he has to do, but he rather be hefker. In any moment you throw off the yoke and he's gone off and running. And yet he's accepted the yoke. Lepel, he's not doing what he wants, but doing like the Adam. That's like the miracle that happens in nature. Nature has its rules. And here, all of a sudden, we're seeing, nature is surrendered to the will of the master. So that's the miracle in nature, but it's not a bittul b'metzias. Nature still remained. It's not a transparent expression of the master, which would be the servant who is, or the child who willingly and lovingly does what the master or the father wants. That's a miracle that happens not invested in nature. So in summary, there's yichud ilo and yichud tata, which means bittul metzias, bittul ayesh. Bittul metzias is engendered and is analogous to and parallels open miracles, and bittul ayesh, Kabbalah's oil, is the Eved remains an Eved, but he's doing what the master wants. That is where Teva is governed by the miracle, and the unexpected happens. We expect the Eved to be hefker, but the Eved is doing what the master wants. He's still an Eved. He's still uninspired. He still remains essentially independent. We don't see him as an extension of the master. He's got his own will. But his own will is surrendered to the master. So here Teva has surrendered to the will of Hashem, and it's doing not what we'd normally expect it to do, and the person was healed, or the miracle happened, but you can't point to anything that has shattered the laws of nature. It's a manipulation of nature, but not a shattering of nature. Huh?
Is that the Bittul Yesh similar to the level of Purim, or is that like a different level?
No, Purim, he's not going to this distinction over here. Purim was just two levels in miracle. Here he's talking about, could be, in a sense it could be, it's like Purim. But even more than that, it is like Purim as well, but Purim is a little easier to see, perhaps not. Perhaps not, yeah. You could say Purim, it's Meliubאוויטש in Teva. Yeah, we could say Purim as an example. Yeah. Yeah. Correct, yeah. Now further, we run out of time in a few minutes. Okay. Further elaboration in the mile of each one. What's the mile of Yichudi Lo? That the bittul pervades him completely. Again, what's Yichudi Lo? Yichudi Lo, the starting point is Eibishter. Eibishter wants creation, there's creation. So what's creation? Just the consequence of his desire that it be, has no other reality. So if you look at creation, and all you see is, this is the consequence of God's will, that means a bittul b'chol mitziyusay. There's no trace of independence. There's nothing remaining in him that isn't completely surrendered. His heart, his mind is not there. Kabbalah Sel is Maisa B'Poel, but there's a whole part of the person that is not surrendered. So that's the Maila of what? Of Yichudi Ilah, that the bittul pervades every level. Everything is nothing other than surrendered, an expression of Hashem's will. That's like the tzaddik. We're talking now tzaddik versus Beinani. It's again the same model. Tzaddik is bittul Yichudi Ilah, tzaddik is bittul b'mitzias, and Beinani is bittul Ayesh and Kabbalah Soil. But there's the Maila, as the Alter Rebbe speaks in Tanya, Maila by bittul the Kabbalah Soil. Now the Maila of Kabbalah Soil isn't the bittul itself. That comes a beautiful point. In a way, it's a truer bittul than the bittul of the tzaddik. Shu bittul amiti, it's a true bittul she'in a kosher mitziyusa shel adam. That's completely nothing to do with the person himself. Why? Shabittul dichudi lo, the bittul of the higher level of bittul, kivin shabittul al yedei shemakir umargish. That's because he understands and feels that before him everything is all nothingness, and therefore if there's an existence, all it is a consequence of his will. But that's a bittul that he appreciates, that he is party to, that the tzaddik feels and lives. So this is a bittul that's expressed in his identity. His identity says, I'm nothing other than his will. But who's saying that? You're saying that. HaKodesh Shaloi, it's his recognition. Veina bittul ambiti, so that's not true, bittul. Because who's talking here? Creation is surrendering and saying, the tzaddik is saying that Hashem is the only reality. Because he feels and sees that. So that's beautiful, but the problem, or the chsaron is, it's not true bittul because you're talking. But to the bittul Kabbalah Oil, shemakabel all of the kaim tzivay Hashem. When a person accepts upon himself to do what Hashem wants, gam kshatziva, you can neged ritzay. I don't want to do this, but I'm doing it anyway. But dugmas eved, like a servant, shumuchrach l'kaim ratzon odan. He has no choice. He has to carry out the master's will, even though he's protesting with every fiber of his being. And we see him doing that. So that act speaks purely of the Adon. He's not in the way over here. On the contrary, he wants to do the opposite. Because what he's doing is, he's completely putting himself aside. How to say bittul? That's a true bittul. Let me illustrate this. two levels of ministers. You have one minister, they come to your house. They come to your house. You're the host to a minister of the king. Now, one of them, he loves the king, and he's devoted, and he's brilliant, so when he looking at him, of course, not lost on you is that he's the minister of the king, but because of his great devotion and love, you're impressed with him. And for a moment, you could even forget that there's a king, because he himself is this very impressive a minister. True, everything he talks about is the king and the government, the country, the policy. His entire life is in the service of the king. But the fact that he was chosen by the king is because of his brilliance and sensitivity and insight and talent. So all of that talent is something that has some value that you're in awe of when you sit with him. In other words, you're impressed with him. Now imagine if another minister comes, it's an idiot savant. He's just almost a fool. But the king chose him as his minister. Now when he sits at your table, you're thinking, like, why him? And he expresses, the king chose him. Not lost on you at all, in a much more powerful way, is the king sitting at your table. Because there's, why this person? Well, the king chose him, he's doing the job, and that's it. So, dafka, because this is the Beinani. This is Kabbalah's oil. Kabbalah's oil speaks volumes, much more so, of the king's presence than the devoted minister, who his own talent is valuable and is impressive, and one is in awe of. Whereas the simple savant, you look at him, not in awe of anything. He's unrefined, uncouth, and there's nothing to be impressed by about him. But you look what he does. He's been appointed by the king. So what you're seeing there is the king. Much more so. You can never forget for a second that this person was appointed by the king, and that's all he is. Whereas the talented minister, you can be impressed with him too, per se. And again, this all comes down to the famous Yud Aleph Nisan Maimer of the Anon Nasiv Malka. Remember? It was the Bikeach that was able to go through all of the levels of Ishtalshalus, and all he wants is the king himself. Not to be impressed by all of these Giloyim per se, but to see in all of them, it's only the Melech himself that is the ultimate connection. Anon Nasiv Malka is like Aran Niflois, similar. Giloy of the Etzem, through all of the details in Teva itself, all of the Giloyim of Ishtalshalus. Okay, to be continued, Be'ezer Hashem. Now today's story.